Welcome to Working Towards Our Purpose, a podcast that offers a different perspective on what a job can be. For everyone out there that's heard that voice in the back of their head asking for something more, it's time to listen to it. I'm your host, Gino, and join me as I interview people who have decided to work in their own purpose. Together, we will learn, become inspired, and hopefully find our own path towards working in our purpose. Joining me today is Genevieve Piturro, who is an inspirational speaker, an author, a consultant, and the founder of Pajama Program, which is a nonprofit she started to give pajamas to kids who were living in shelters and didn't have any. Her book, Purpose, Passion, and Pajamas, won the National Indie Excellence Award, and she was also featured on Oprah. Genevieve, I'm really happy to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, Gino. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. So why don't you tell us, to get started, a little bit about yourself. I'm interested in your background, your schooling, what you did in the corporate world. I know you had a corporate career, and kind of just share, whatever you feel comes to you.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in New York in a very, very traditional Italian family.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you know a little bit about that with your name.
Yes.
Yeah. My dad came off the boat from Italy with his father. He was 15. And of course, I wanted the American dream, and my grandfather wanted my dad to get married and have a family in the United States and give them everything that he could. And so he married my mom, who was American but Italian background, and they raised four of us, and I was the firstborn. So I felt a lot of pressure to uphold all the traditions, and there were most of them I loved. What's not to love about, just hugs and kisses and great food and, always having family around. That was all the good stuff. But my parents wanted me to get married and have kids. I felt that, although they didn't always say that. I knew that was expected. But I used to sneak down and watch Mary Tyler Moore and watch strong women. And I loved the idea of being on my own, maybe because I was, the oldest and I had three to follow after me and looking up to what I was doing and watching. And I felt pressure to, be a good example. But that was the small part of me that was really leading me. How can I be a corporate woman in a man's world and make my way that way? So I followed that dream. And it was rocky with my parents, of course, because, threw them for a loop. But I did that. And I went to Fordham in New York and I studied communications and I worked at WFUV radio. And from there, I went on to do radio and then TV. And for 12 years was in the TV world and went up to VP marketing. And it was an exciting life. It was exactly what I expected. But I didn't realize until a voice in me, when I had a quiet moment in my apartment, a question came to me from here. I'm pointing to my heart because I know the difference between this and this now, the head. And I heard a quiet whisper ask, if this is the next 30 years of your life, is this enough? And it stopped me cold. And I realized there was something missing, that if I kept going at the rate I was, workaholic, crazy schedule on my own, I'd be really tired and alone in 30 years. And yeah, the money was good and I had pretty things, but in a moment, sort of like the light went on and I said, okay, but what is that really going to leave me feeling? And I realized that there were things in that tradition that I'd been raised in that would have filled that hole. And one of them would have been children. So I thought, how can I bring children into my life, in the life I have now? And that's when I remembered a news report I saw of police and social workers sort of storming an apartment and taking the children out of a very unsafe, unhealthy scenario. And I said, I wonder if I can find where they bring those children in these cases and maybe visit with them. So I called the shelters. First, I called the police. They told me about the shelters, and I called the shelters and asked if I could come in at night and read to the children. And they welcomed me. And that's how purpose started to come into my language, because I don't know about you or about your listeners, but nobody ever asked me when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, have you discovered your purpose? That's important. That's your North Star. Never heard that word. And even later, I thought purpose was reserved for very special people, the famous people who did something earth-shattering and, changed the world, like Oprah and Deepak Chopra and Einstein and Alexander Graham Bell, all those people. But I've learned, that if I had a purpose that I found, through that, what came next, everybody has a purpose. And I started reading in the shelters. And that's when I met the little girl that changed everything. So that's part one. And the second part is so simple. I started reading to these children, and I saw, after I read to them, the room they were going to sleep in. Now, this was an emergency shelter, so they were very safe, caring, loving caregivers, but it's not a home. Certainly isn't a home you'd know, or I'd know, or probably your listeners and viewers would know. So when I stared in that empty room with cots and futons, and the kids they were in soiled clothes, whatever the police or social workers grabbed them, they were still wearing, unless there was something in their size at the emergency shelter just for 24 hours to put on. They were uncomfortable, and they were wriggling around, and some of them were crying, trying to fall asleep. And I thought, this isn't bedtime. My mom's bedtime for us flashed in front of my mind, and kissing and hugs and snacks and story after story and giggles, and tucking us in. And of course, we had pajama time. We had put on our pajamas, and that's what stuck out to me. No pajamas. And they were trying to get comfortable in the clothes they'd been wearing for who knows how long. And I brought pajamas the next time with the storybooks. And after I read them, I started handing them out. And my world turned upside down when a little girl asked me quietly, "What are pajamas?" And I found myself trying to stay calm because I was exploding inside. I was just heartbroken, having to explain pajamas to her. And the staff person told me she has no idea. She's never had pajamas. And that began this obsession that now, that became Pajama Program 23 years ago.
Thank you for sharing that whole story. I really love the way you articulate it, and kind of how you walk through it, and so many different directions I can go in that. But I think the first thing I want to talk about is, you mentioned early on, like when you first heard that voice in your head, and you were listening to your heart maybe instead of your head. And that's something that like I've noticed as of recent, since I've left corporate, the difference between the two, right? Because you can think your way out of anything, but like feeling something is a much different feeling. And I think a lot of times, as someone who is very in their head all the time, I used to be an engineer, very logical, analytical, like figuring out or being able to feel the difference between that two has been like a game changer as far as making decisions and going forward. Was that something that came to you easily, or like were you always able to kind of like make decisions with your heart versus your head? Was that something you were aware of? What was that like for you?
I think it was split. I think looking back, there were heartfelt decisions in there, but I know I ran everything through my brain first. And it was hard for me to trust what I wanted to do, because my brain was telling me, you have a mortgage. You've been in this business for 12 years. Where are you going to get money to pay for your life? You're not going to get money for giving kids pajamas, and you're going to get fired because you're doing all of this behind everybody's back, and you're really a terrible employee all of a sudden. So you're not going to get away with this. So what are you doing? And so I felt that constantly, which is why I didn't tell anyone for months what I was doing. I was trying to juggle, and in my book, one of the lessons is leave juggling to the clowns, because obviously I made a mess of things. And I really had to find a way to switch the leader from head to heart. And I think I had just consistently followed my heart, even though my head was saying, you're crazy, you're headed for trouble, you don't understand. There came a point where it switched. And because our brains are smart, what happened, and I tell people this is what happens, your brain says, okay, I see. The heart's going, so I'm smart, let me help. And that's really what it felt like in time. So it reversed. My head still kept me smart, but it was behind the heart. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. I love the way that you said that. It's almost like with a practice, your brain learns like, all right, I guess we'll listen to this other voice sometimes, and like we'll help it where we can. That's really interesting. So tell me what it was like to balance the both of them. Like you said, it was you were keeping it a secret, and same thing for me. Like I never told anybody about the side business that I had, and especially when I was sent home for COVID and like nobody was watching me, I felt extremely guilty for doing both jobs, 2 laptops all at the same time. What was that like for you, and what eventually made you break?
Yes, I get what you're talking about. But I was hiding in an office because it was years ago when there was no COVID and you couldn't bring your phone to work, which was the size of a shoebox. And I was lying. I was bringing in pajamas in suitcases because I was going to make a mad dash at lunchtime. And I never took lunch. I was a workaholic. I came in before everyone and I left after everyone. And then I never took lunch. But now I was coming in late because I had to get to any store that opened at 9 or earlier, took a long lunch and left early to buy pajamas and bring them to the shelters. And I was coming in with suitcases and just saying I was going to visit a friend for a weekend. I was staying overnight, and nobody ever looked in the suitcase. So I thought I was okay. And I was answering the phone because not only were the shelters calling me that I knew about, but they were sharing my name with other people who ran shelters. So I was getting new calls and I didn't want to miss any of them. And my work was clearly deteriorating. I mean, because it was not a priority anymore. I was more concerned about saying yes to everybody who called and finding a way. So the bills were mounting. My work was deteriorating. I was giving no one an explanation, and I didn't have anyone that I had to tell. But I did think it would come to a point where I'd have to tell someone, and I needed some support. So I picked sort of a neutral friend. I really thought about who to pick because I didn't want anyone to get me in trouble who knew what I was doing, could get to my bosses, and I didn't want anyone close to my family, but I wanted someone who also was sort of a workaholic because I felt like maybe they would say, yeah, I feel empty too. So I picked a friend. We went out for drinks and I practiced before I saw her what I was going to say. And every time I practiced, it sounded ridiculous. I'm going to quit my job because I met this little girl who didn't know what pajamas were. I can't believe it. Can you believe it? All these kids never had pajamas. This is what I want to do. And I was hoping she'd say, I'll help you because I needed help. Instead, she knocked me down completely. I mean, question after question, valid questions. But to me, it was like she was stabbing me in the heart. Why are you doing this? You're not saving their lives. Can't you just do it on an afternoon on the weekend? You've worked so hard, 12 years. How are you going to pay your bills? And it was like coming from everywhere. And I was torn up because I knew that she had valid points and I had no answers, but I was heartbroken that she didn't feel what I felt, that this can't stay this way. We need to get everybody to help. So I clammed up again for more months. So that was really hard. That was really hard, really hard. And one of the lessons that I also teach is you got to get your cheerleaders because making a change like that, as you said, is lonely and you doubt yourself and you worry, if you're found out, at least I did, that I'd be in worse trouble. So it was really difficult for me. And then I just tried again when I met a great guy who I knew that he expected me, to be a 2-income relationship. And I figured, let me tell him before I get in too deep. And I said the same thing I said to my girlfriend. And he said, I think you should go for it. And that was the first cheerleader. And it felt really right.
That's awesome. It's so important to surround yourself with people who can, I don't know, see similar visions or see like the good in you, I guess.
Yeah. Or feel like you were saying before, lead with their hearts. But so many of us don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the automatic reaction is the practical questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And for me, figuring out like why those people are coming from there has been extremely helpful in not like personalizing those conversations. Because I've had similar conversations when I first started and just felt stupid telling friends like what I wanted to do and then like feeling small and not wanting to do it anymore. But there's such value in like being able to have a connection with somebody and they kind of like see where your vision is or like inspire you even more to keep going towards that. And I mean, for me, like networking has been a huge help in that. Like for a while I was doing stuff all alone and then I became part of this co-working place where I just met all these awesome people. And yeah, it's so much help is all around you if you're kind of like open and willing to it. And also kind of being like intentional with who you share yourself with, I think is also kind of important. So what was the moment where you eventually did decide to leave corporate? I mean, it must have been a difficult decision.
It was. Well, there was an episode at work where I was packing up some materials, and I was supposed to go on the road and send the materials ahead of me. And my boss, who traveled a lot, which I was thankful for because that's why I got away with a lot, he was there and he came over. And I mean, I was always on edge because I knew that other people probably noticed I was a different person and he might. And he just looked at what I was packing up. And in that moment, I saw the way I was organizing the materials, which was a mess. And he just said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And my mind was like, does he know? Was he asking me the deeper question other than what are you putting in the box? And that was the moment I said to myself, and I didn't say anything to him. I said, I'll fix it. My mind is somewhere else. And I knew then, and I had to have a discussion with him when I got back. I didn't tell him, and I don't know to this day if he knows about that moment, but I had to say, I have to do something else. And I didn't go into it, but coincidentally, the company was having some issues too. So I felt, okay, let me see if he'll buy me part-time to ease some of the financial concerns he had. And it worked. So I went part-time, and that was hard because that's a big salary change, but I didn't care, which was pretty selfish on my part, because by then I was with the man that I married, and I put it all on him. And I, through the rocky financial time, which was a lot because then I quit, I just always kept saying to him, well, you told me to go for it. So, now's the time you can help here. And he didn't have a big paying job either. So it was trying. It was really trying. But when I knew I was letting somebody down and that I wasn't going to go back and fix it, I had to come clean, sort of. I didn't tell him honestly, but I did back out. So I wasn't a disappointment to my employer.
Right. And even to yourself, I'm sure, because it's, your whole career, I'm imagining, because I was the same way, like you wanted to be a good employee, you wanted to do things well. And now all of a sudden you're not being a good employee and you're like almost questioning your own integrity. And you're like, why am I, doing this? But then, it's for other reasons. And like you said, you had to move on to something else. That's.
I blocked out the guilt because otherwise I can, I think all of us can carry guilt and do the wrong thing. And I blocked it out again, selfishly, because I had work to do. I had to get the pajamas. So I focused on that. And I just put the guilt in a little compartment in the back of my brain.
Yeah. And even that word selfish too, I think is something that I think about a lot lately, being selfish and being able to do what you think is right or to fill your own cup or to, I don't know, get yourself in a higher energy level. Like selfish has like a bad term, but if you can be selfish and get yourself into a position where then you can help others, then it's not really being selfish, because in the long run, you're able to help more people than you would have anyways. Like that's the biggest thing I noticed from corporate. Like this huge anchor just came off of me and I was better to the people around me. I had time to listen to my friends. I was more in the present moment. Like that's kind of coming from being selfish. And I don't know, I guess what are your thoughts on being selfish these days and that word selfish?
Yes, I agree with you. I think we have to live our purpose, and we all have one. And I think COVID showed us that more and more people are saying, looking back at their lives and saying, I did all this and almost lost. We didn't know if we were going to make it through. And I did a lot of soul searching, and now I want to switch doing things, do something I really love. And it's sort of an okay feeling now, less selfish. But, and I teach this all the time, listening to your heart and changing what your path has been doesn't have to do with starting a nonprofit. It has to do with what you love, because as you said, that is contagious. How you are when you are doing what you're meant to do, what's yours to do, and you discovered it early or late, it changes your relationships. It changes your attitude, your vibration. It changes people around you for the better. You could make $1 billion singing and that's your purpose. And look how you fill the world with love. That's not nonprofit. The same with anything you do, you're sharing something from your heart and other people feel it and you raise their vibration as well. So it can be anything. It's
Yes.
contribution.
Yeah. I love that. And that's why I loved reading your book, because you're doing that, right? You're showing by example, like what you did to follow your purpose. And now you're inspiring other people around you. And even so, I know that you're, doing more speaking and writing. You have a second book and kind of like sharing your story now and getting to that stage. What has that been like for you as far as like transitioning to be more of a, I don't know, sharing what you've done or who you are?
Yeah. Well, I want to inspire people because like you and I, we changed paths. We were already set for many years and it's okay to change paths. Just change if you want to change. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what you want to do. If it sounds ridiculous to other people, there are ways to share and to find people who will support you, because we all feel like we're talking about alone and embarrassed and we don't know where to start. I had no idea what a 501c3 was until I got an onslaught of packages because of an article in a magazine. And a letter came in that thousands of packages. A letter said, please send us your 501c3 so we can send you a grant. And I didn't even know what that was. And talk about feeling dumb and having to start to ask questions about that, because here I am. I'd given to some charities and I volunteered once or twice, but I didn't even know what that was and what it entailed. But I knew at that moment I had to do this, to be responsible to all the people who were now trusting me with their goods and their pajamas and their books for the kids and their money. So I try to inspire people not to get stuck there and turn back. But if I did it, because I did it in a messy way, but I learned a lot of lessons, I want them to know it's not late and it's so, so worth it.
Mm-hmm. So what would be the first thing that you would tell somebody who, has the list of excuses or, the monetary reasons or thinks it's too big of a task? Because I think that's part of it too, is just it seems like this insurmountable task that you don't know where to start. What would you say to help somebody out like that?
Well, first, I'm a jumper. So I jump. I still do it. And I figure out how to swim after I jump into the water. But there's a slide and there's a jump. So I've learned that. And for many people, a slide is either something to continue for the rest of their lives or something that will take them to a jump. But if they are, say they're in a job that they like, but they love to sing, or they love to care for animals, or they love to do flower arrangements, whatever it is, but they don't think that they can make a living or as much money as they need, then slide that into your life. And I teach that too. Even an hour a week doing what you love, whether you can do it hands-on or you can immerse yourself in the field, research, talk to people who've done it, find a way to bring it a little bit into your life every week. And that will change your whole attitude, because putting it on the back burner and shoving it in the back is such a disservice to yourself and to your heart and to the reason that you're here. It's not giving it the breath and the light that it should have. So even an hour a week, and there's so many ways to get that hour in your week, will make you feel great. And other people will notice the change in you because you've given yourself this major gift. And if for the rest of your life that fills you, then a slide it is. And if you find, whether you decide at the beginning, I'm ready for a jump, or you say, you know what, I like this slide, I'm starting to see a path, then great. And I can help you get there, but that, that's where you're headed and it's a little easier to digest.
Yeah, I love that. Because it's not just black and white. There's many different ways you can go about it. And I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday who I hadn't seen in a little bit, and we were kind of talking about this. And one thing that I was saying was like just like talking about the thing that you're excited about or you're passionate about, like you tell somebody and you get a positive reaction and now you're excited about it, or maybe you get some feedback and it gives you an idea to do something else. And like, just even like communicating that or feeling comfortable enough to communicate with somebody and sharing something that maybe feels vulnerable, which leads me to like the idea of human connection and like meeting certain people who, there's like an unspoken thing about you. It's something that like I'm noticing all over the place now. And you meet somebody, and like another example, somebody that like I work with recently, like something that like I do that I don't really like talk about, I just like shared freely. And I'm like, wow, I didn't really expect to share that, but I did because of this certain, connection that you have with somebody. And I don't know, talk to me about like human connection from your experience and like how it's important for you.
It changed everything for me. And it sounds like it changed everything for you too, because it was awful holding in this bursting energy that I had, whether it was frantic to try to get to these kids or the joy when I got to them and the little things that, that I saw, their reactions to the pajamas and things like that. It was awful not to share that. And when my new husband said, go for it, it sort of made me breathe. And of course, I started to tell more people. And when you share, you find your people. And not everybody has to be your people.
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly people who probably would say I was crazy to give up what I gave up, and the life that I continue to lead, isn't as affluent. I get that. And that's, and that's okay. But when you find your people who are doing what they love and want to hear more and ask you for support and let you into their heart when they are considering a change, this is bond that's created. And then you can show them and lead them to more people who will be supportive. And imagine if we all did that. We all shared, oh, you want to play guitar? Okay, I know some people. Let me put you in touch with them. And those people have a heart open for the new person. It's just a magical connection that we need, that feeds us, that should be more natural than we give it credit for. Because as I say, we're in this together. And if I've learned anything, and it's my number one lesson, because people used to say to me what I used to think about other people. Wow, look at one person. Look what they did. Look at Oprah. She's one person. What a difference she made. And Martin Luther King was one person. And, and all these people, or everybody from a president to a scientist, came up with that idea. Oh my gosh, Einstein was brilliant. He changed everything. But it's not, even when people said that to me, look at one idea. It's not the power of one that changes anything. It's the power of one another that moves mountains and moves people. And that's the way I believe we get things done for ourselves and as a community. And that's how we give back. And that's how legacies are started, because people are left with the memory of this wonderful feeling about something that they were part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that too. I love the way that you describe that. It makes it, when you speak, it resonates with me a lot. And I think, I don't know, there's something in your book. That I remember a section in your book where you're talking about not knowing how to get from like A to B, but just kind of like going for it and having trust, and then almost magically like these things would kind of like pop up, and it seems like a miracle or whatever word you want to use to describe it. Can you talk to us about that? Maybe give us an example of a time that happened to you, and your thoughts on that now.
Yes, it happens all the time. It's the way that it is, but some of us don't believe it. Some of us push it away because it just sounds like it couldn't happen to me. But I can tell you, it happens more and more, and it happened all the 20 some years, and it still happens with Pajama Program. I have lots of examples, but I didn't believe in that either. I'd call them coincidences. In my first life, I'll call it, good things happen, put good energy out, and okay, good things happen. Oh yeah, I'm thinking about somebody, and then they call, wow, what a coincidence. That's a one-off. But things when you're on purpose, like the universe, the invisible God, everything you believe in, because if you believe we're not alone, when we're on purpose, which is the way I believe we were designed to be, things do happen. So, for instance, in my book, I talk about at the beginning, when I had that letter from someone who said, I need your 501c3, and I researched it, and I said, oh my goodness, this is a process with the IRS. I have to do this. I need a lawyer. Now, I did not have money. I didn't have a job. I was never a saver. So I didn't have money. And then I had quit my job at that point. And we were in my 1-bedroom apartment. and the boxes were up to the sky of people sending us stuff. And I said to my new husband, and I made a fist when I was leaving that day, I need to find a lawyer. Now, I didn't say it on purpose. I didn't make a fist on purpose, and I left. I called him at lunch because on the way to the office, just an hour and a half later, I'm on the corner across the street in Manhattan, and I hear a man call my name, Genevieve, is that you? And I turned and I recognized him, but I didn't know who he was. And he said, I'm Santiago. I'm Mary's friend. Remember, we met a while ago. I'm an attorney. I couldn't believe it. He said, let's catch up. You want to have lunch? And I said, yes. And we had lunch and we caught up. I told him I needed an attorney because I gave him the short version of the story. And he said, well, I don't do that kind of law, but I know somebody who does. And I was off to the races. And that happened. And to this day, my husband says, make that fist. When you need that, whatever you did in that moment, make that fist and you bring it to you.
Yeah, I like that. The physical action of something.
Yeah.
And talk to us more too about, like, I know you're a vision board person and like manifesting and like, meditating on things, thinking how things feel. How important is that in your like daily life? Is it something that you always come back to? Is it something you like start with, or what's it like for you?
Always. I'm looking at my vision board right there, and I change it, at least once a year, at the beginning of the year. And yes, early on, my number one cheerleader, my new husband, he said, what would change things? Because of course it was a struggle with Pajama Program financially. And for me, just trying to figure it out alone with his help and, step by step. And he said, what would be a game changer? This was a couple of years in. And I said, getting on Oprah. And he said, okay, let's meditate. And I said, I didn't even know how to meditate. And I said, well, everybody wants to get on Oprah. I think that's like, crazy. And he said, no, let's go. And there was a park by us and we'd go there. And he literally told me, sit down, close your eyes, picture, visualize, and tell God, the universe, whoever you want, you're open. Find a way to bring her into the picture, find a way to connect with her, sit quietly. And we did that. Now, at first I thought this is crazy. My mind was winning again in that scenario, but I did it. It felt fun. I pictured myself on her couch talking to her. And of course, a couple of years later, her studio called, and I got on the show. So it works. And there are lots of other smaller things that happen that are on the vision board, goals and things. But it's a daily practice for me, the meditation and the visualizing. And like I said, I look at it. I'm looking at it now. It's everything from a picture of me little, feeling joy, because feeling joy as often as you can every day changes your vibration, lifts you. And, and goals, financial goals, picture of the beach house I want, all that stuff, and I teach it. You got to put up pictures that call you, that resonate with you, not just a picture of a Mercedes. Yeah, look through. It might be a Toyota that calls you, and that's the picture you need.
Yeah, and what was it like when you finally heard the news that you were going to be on Oprah, and that thing that you had thought about and brought into fruition was there? What was that feeling like?
Yeah, surreal. I go into detail in the book, and people can watch it on my website, the episode, but it was very surreal. And when they called, it was 2 weeks before, from the first call to telling me that I would be on the show. I didn't tell anyone, not even my husband, that they called, because they kept calling and asking more questions. And, of course, I was waiting to find out if they were going to say, okay, or, well, thank you very much. And I didn't want to tell anyone, because the last thing you ever want is to say the show called and then have to go around and say, but they didn't pick me. And I did not want that. So I didn't say anything. And then she said, we'd like to book you. And then I told just a few people, because again, you have to get there. They have to tape it. It has to go well. And there can't be any turnbacks. So it was surreal in the first part, prepping with them for my appearance. And then actually on the show, which was really not how they prepped me, because it was a surprise, not to give it away. But that whole thing and what came after was more than a game changer.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I'll definitely leave some links in the show notes so people can go see that video and, get to your website and all that sort of thing. I do want to also ask you about certain things that like you've learned along the way. And like for me, reading has been a really helpful thing. And there's certain books that have like pretty much changed the way that I see the world or like changed the course of my life. Is there anything, books or any other sort of things that you've like been able to consume and then it changed like your vision on thing? Anything that like stands out in particular?
Yeah, the old books, Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, Bob Proctor's books on, how your thought influences, and his videos to this day. He left us a couple of years ago, but about seeing things, and it's your attitude, it's your feeling, your vibration that attracts things to you, whether it's good or bad, however you're feeling. Those stories, those books, they knew. Even Einstein is coming out now, Tesla, all these people saw things in their minds, felt things, knew that they could achieve. They knew they had to go after what they wanted to achieve because it was coming from some incredible force in them. And when you're guided and you feel this force in you, pushing you, pulling you to something, it's an incredible, overwhelming feeling to go that way. And I think people have talked about it, The Secret. It's true. I lived it and I wouldn't have believed it before, but I lived it and I know it's true. And every time I jump and try something new, I have to get back to that and say, it's real. Don't get lost in the fear of something new all over again. Just trust that it was the right time to move.
Yeah, that's a big one, is fear. And I try to do that when I find myself going down those spirals of negativity, like thinking like, am I thinking about this from a fear standpoint or is it something else? And it's almost always something being in fear. And then I can like recognize and be like, okay, well, that's just something that you're afraid of right now. You're not going to feel like that tomorrow. Just kind of like let it pass through you and move on to the next thing. But yeah, even just like for me, the language of energy is something that like I learned from this book called The Celestine Prophecy, which I love that book so much. I tell everybody to read it. I actually have multiple copies that I give to people.
I'm writing it down to read it again. Okay.
Yeah. I actually just started again and I was afraid. I've only read it one time and I was afraid to read it again because I didn't want it to be like less significant.
Yes,
but as soon as I opened it, I was like, nope, it's exactly the same.
Yes. Good.
I love that book. Love that book so much. So what's next for you? What are you excited about for the future?
Well, more live speaking engagements because we're back doing live. And the reception's been great because I think, again, through and since COVID, people are more willing to speak their truth and find what they want to do and change. And so it's resonating and I'm able to feel like I can inspire people and they're ready for it more than ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely feel that as well. Just people getting like, it's almost like a society-wide like energy of like annoyance and like just they're tired of it. They don't want to keep doing the previous way of living or wanting something more. I think that's always the language that I've always used. Is like just wanting something more.
Yes, not enough. And there's friction because clearly it's we're transitioning as a human race to this foreign freedom that we were taught, and some people still hold as not allowed, as selfish, and you have to play by the rules. And the people who don't want to see the change are, bucking the system. And the people who feel like I don't have to do that anymore are changing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And that's something that's very exciting to me and meeting more people who are, existing out of love instead of fear, I guess is maybe what it is. So yeah. And then, as we're coming to the end of our time here, I always like to ask, what does purpose mean to you? And in your own words, what is purpose?
Well, I think definitely following your heart voice and going in, on my website, I have an exercise to find your purpose and start there. Because if you can take some quiet time and talk to yourself and be honest and write down what yourself is telling you, paper and pen, not on a computer, it can be an amazing revelation. And you discover things about yourself, if you're honest, that have been there for a long time that we just push away because it's not acceptable, or we don't see how we're going to do it, or we have to turn everybody else's life upside down if we make these changes or do this thing or say these things. But if we're honest, 100% honest with ourselves in our quiet moment, we'll discover the purpose that we have that's unique to us. It can be a singer, like other people are singers, but you have your own voice. It can be that you create a job that doesn't seem that it's on anybody's radar, but you can create something. It's there. It's in there, but we've covered it up with mounds and mounds of doubt and fear and the way it's always been and what will other people think, that we really need to take as much time. If you can't take 90 minutes, for this, then I don't know how else you can be real with yourself, to start giving it air to breathe, start thinking about what you've discovered in those 90 quiet minutes, and see how ideas will come, little doors will open, little coincidences will happen. And, people are always asking for signs. I'm going to change my career if I get a sign. People always tell me that, right? And I say the same thing to myself even now. I'll know if that's the direction if I get a sign. If in the next 2 days someone calls me who's in that field, then that's my sign. And it'll happen. But it starts with being honest and saying, I would love to change, and this is what I would love to do instead. Then doors open, signs come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being open to receiving the signs is the biggest thing for me. And even just like being curious too, for me, this past year has been a huge word for me, curiosity, and just being curious with the things that excite me, even if it seems weird or like you can't see what you would do with it, just following it and being like, well, that's interesting. And then it leads you to another thing, and it's another thing, like you're saying. So yeah.
It's free, right? Mm-hmm. Freeing.
Yes, very much so. And yeah, the last thing, if people really resonated with you, where can they find you? What's your website and that sort of thing?
Yeah, my website's GenevievePiturro.com, and you can find Pajama Program at pajamaprogram.org.
Awesome. And I will definitely leave that in the show notes so people don't have to remember it. And thank you so much for your time and for your vulnerability and your stories and speaking about your truth and sharing it and spreading it to other people, because it's really making a difference. And like I said, I had no idea who you were until I found this book randomly in a bookstore, and the words that you specifically chose for the title caught me, and it's been nothing but positivity for me. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, I'm so happy that you shared your story and that you're doing what you love and you took a chance. It's inspiring. And anybody that knows you, I'm sure, is feeling that positive change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a great reminder. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for listening to Working Towards Our Purpose. If you liked today's episode and are interested in more, you can sign up for my Substack newsletter with the link in the show notes, where I share thoughts, tips, and ideas that I'm learning along my journey to help inspire you. The show was produced by Pleasant Podcast at pleasantpodcast.com.